Hello, and welcome to the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast, a resilience podcast where we talk about all the challenging things that we're working to overcome, like anxiety, health, and relationship issues. My name is Sarah. Hello, and welcome to the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast. I'm Sarah, and I'm happy to connect with you this week. This week, we are going to talk to somebody that is truly inspirational. She's been in so many tough situations and somehow found resilience to move forward. And I think that this conversation is going to be really good if you're somebody that is doing work on yourself, that's maybe had a tough childhood or some different challenging things that you've been through in your life. And hopefully you can really feed off of some of the resilience that's talked about in this conversation. I know we are all working through so many things. I myself am doing a lot of work in therapy on different aspects of my life. And, it's a lot. It can be really challenging when we're trying to dig deep into things, dig into our past, dig into our current situations. And sometimes it feels like we're not really getting anywhere. And so I think hearing from somebody that's able to display that resilience can be really helpful. So we're going to speak to Gladys Camacho. She's, as I said, a huge inspiration. She's been through a number of difficult situations, including having a child at a really young age and a cancer diagnosis. And she's very resilient. She has been able to become a successful parent and coach and an inspiration to many in her community. So let's hear about her background and how she really learned to thrive in these tough situations. And maybe there'll be a nugget in there for you that can help in terms of being resilient. We're going to learn about something called reparenting, which I've never heard about before, and some of the other key tools that she's using. So please welcome Gladys Camacho. So hello, Gladys. Welcome to the podcast. I'm happy to connect with you today.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here with you.
Perfect. So why don't we start with you providing a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So I'm Puerto Rican, so proud, Latina, born in Chicago. That's kind of where it all started. I say, born in this windy city, and then moved to Milwaukee when I was younger. I was probably just turning around 10-ish. Come from a divorced family, and no dad in the picture. Youngest sibling, there were 6 of us. Now there are 5 of us. I'll probably have an opportunity in a little bit to explain more. One of my brothers, who was my best friend, died as a result of COVID-19 in 2020. So now there's 5 of us.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. That goes along with my story, because you're going to get one part, but then there's this other part that even just thinking about it right now actually is kind of making my cheeks a little warm, by thinking about some of these things that we're going to talk about today. But yeah, so lived in Chicago, born in Chicago, Milwaukee. Now I'm in the Pacific Northwest. This is where I came about 4 years ago. I was in human resources for about 25 years. That would be a surprise to a lot of people to hear that a teen mom turned professional. And where I'm at now is such a story that I have to just chuckle myself. So that's a little bit about me.
That's great. And I know what we're going to talk about a lot is, thriving through adversity and tough situations. And I know that you had mentioned previously that you had a child at a really young age. And, I totally commend you, because I had my first child at 28 and I found it to be one of the toughest challenges of my life so far. You really have to dig deep. I wondered if you could talk us through a little bit of your experience of having a child and parenting at a young age and sort of how that's impacted you.
Yeah, how do I even start with that? I had my son a month after I turned 16. So my 15th year was mostly pregnant. And then having this baby in my hands at 16, and going home, living obviously with my mom, a high school student, having to experience waking up in the middle of the night, taking care of this baby, ensuring that his needs are met while trying to go to school. I remember I'll never forget, in Milwaukee, the high school I went to had a childcare in the high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. That was, 90s, hey, a lot of teen pregnancies at that time. And so they had a daycare in the school, and this little yellow bus would pick me up and my son, and we would go to school together. And wow. Yeah, I know, we'd come back, and then I had, this homework thing that I was trying to do, which I was horrible at already. Now I have a baby and being a mom, and didn't know what it was like to be a teen anymore, because that was, thrown out the window. And then I'm going to be honest with you, Sarah, a lot of it is a blur to me, actually. I think that, traumatizing childhood experiences are difficult and challenging. And then you add more adverse child experiences, like being a teen mom in a really sucky, non-parenting environment. I think my brain sucked up some of those memories. So I know it was hard. It was hard. My mother tried a little bit, but my mom was in her own world. Siblings, me being the youngest, they were all out of the house. So it was like me and this baby, and it was hard. It was very, very hard. Lots of tears, lots of mistakes, to say the least, lots of mistakes. I'm just glad he's 31 and alive and doing well, and my other kids. So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. And I can imagine, when you talk about like not getting the sleep, all of that, I'm sure really affects your memory of the time too. I can just only imagine. And high school, like the work is stressful in itself. So I can see that would have been a lot with the child then as well. So yeah, good for you for finding a path through that, for sure. And I know that you also mentioned that, you have been involved in reparenting yourself. You talked a little bit about your parent there. I wondered if you wanted to share a little bit more about your experience in terms of reparenting and what is even meant by that term, because it's something I'm hearing more and more, but I don't think many people are familiar with.
Well, when you grow up parentless, right, you grow up without a parent, you're already doing a lot of things by yourself. Yes, I had a roof over my head and clothing to wear and food to eat most of the time. I didn't always have food to eat. And then not having the basic needs met that a little girl needs. Like, I didn't have anyone to teach me how to brush my hair. I have very, very curly hair. No one. I remember being so embarrassed in school because I didn't have that. My mom wasn't there for me to do the basic things that, a little girl wants. I do have one memory. I remember being around 12 or 13, walking home from school and saying to myself, is this clear? I'll never forget this. I remember saying, why can't my mom have on an apron and bake for me and have nice snacks for me when I get home from school? Like, this was the image I had of what a mom was supposed to do, what I needed. And I remember walking home from school and tears running down my eyes. Like, I just wanted this, not having a parent, even for basic things like hey, what's it going to look like when I, have my first female things happen? How about the birds and the bees? So it was a lot of learning on my own, and then parenting myself by experiencing the repercussions of my decisions, and then trying to teach myself what I wish I would have been taught beforehand. most people think when we're teenagers and young kids that we don't want our parents to tell us what to do. No, we do. We do. We crave the guidance, and I didn't have the guidance. So I guided myself. And through that, there was a lot of challenges along the way, like being a teen mom.
Yeah, and I've definitely heard reparenting like in different ways. Sometimes the parent's not there, other times they're there, but kind of like emotionally not there.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, those are some good examples of what you experienced. And so how then did undertaking, some of that reparenting, how did it help you in the end? Like, what was the impact in terms of like your more adult life once you got there?
Yeah, going back to your comment about the emotionless. Oh, I'm not even sure how to explain that. Not having a parent. My father walked out. They were divorced, and he didn't care to be a dad. A mom who was too busy living her life post-divorce and having fun, and a child, or I would say children, because my siblings were in the same boat. They were a little older. Some of them were gone. But for me, not having the parent to even just tell me they love me, something that doesn't cost anything, a parent to affirm me, a parent to say anything nice to me. And so, yes, there's that whole aspect that I didn't know I needed. And then when I became a parent, I looked at this little boy and I said, just tell him you love him as many times as you can. Don't stop. Hug him as much as you can. And I'm not the most affectionate person even to this day. But I remember just always telling, my son and my kids, I love you. Do you? And I remember asking my kids, do you know I love you? Like, I needed to know they knew and that understood this, because I didn't get that at all. And it helped me be more observant of what I was doing, in the fact that it's not just the physical, but it's also the emotional aspect of parenting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can identify with that. I've definitely made that a big thing myself, just trying to make sure that I'm checking in with that and making sure. And it gives you such a different perspective in having a child, because you do think like, wow, it's like your parent missed out on so much. I think there's, those kinds of thoughts as well that you have. So yeah, in terms of the reparenting then, have you been able to get to a point then where you sort of are past that and you've been able to move through it, or is it still kind of something you're doing?
No. I was able to, admittedly, I'm not embarrassed to say, to get help, for a long time, when I needed, someone to tell me that what I went through, was not normal, and that to find ways to look deep inside of me for the things that I didn't get, and then trying to give to my kids what I didn't get. And it's still a challenge. I'm not a perfect parent. My son's 31, and then I have 3 beautiful daughters, but I just needed to get the help. And I'm totally past that. I am very proud of who I am today, for the, sticking by what I did, even through the mistakes I learned. And I'm very grateful. I have amazing children. And that's what matters. Yeah. And the relationship that then you've been able to forge. And I can imagine that validation, in seeking help was probably really helpful, because all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, this is all the stuff that's been missing. It's having somebody confirm what you sort of thought and you knew, but maybe didn't necessarily really know yet. No, but Sarah, I needed to hear, because I lived with this guilt, and I needed to hear that there were areas of my parenting that were challenged, and that it wasn't because I chose it, I didn't have to give. And that's not what, I'm now understanding that I didn't have a lot of the tools. Yes, I told my kids I loved them and I hugged them and I did the best I could. But there are areas where I could have done more, but I didn't have it. How do you give what you don't have? And I learned that. And that was so healing for me. So healing for me to say, oh, okay, I didn't have it. That's why I didn't give it perfectly in every way. Yeah.
And then being able to take that knowledge for sure. No, I absolutely think that's great that you were able to seek the help and then be able to apply it even. And you're right, like modeling is so important with parents, and we hear that more now. I don't know that our parents really heard that messaging, but kind of modeling how to love and modeling how to interact, and it's definitely something that I'm always thinking about too.
That's great.
So yeah, I mean, your story is just so interesting, and appreciate so much you sharing all these aspects. I know you also mentioned that you received a cancer diagnosis, and I thought maybe you'd want to talk a little bit more about, given all of these challenging times, how you remain so resilient and seem to be able to overcome that adversity in those tough situations.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I appreciate talking about, because every time I tell my story, a little piece of me receives more healing. So in 2020, I mentioned earlier that my brother passed away of COVID-19. He was my best friend. I don't know how to express the relationship that we had. It was just very special. And in March of 2020, he tells me that he is in the hospital with COVID-19. He designated me his decision maker. That same week, I already found out I had a mass in my kidney. Then they tell me that there is a tumor in my pancreas. And I was dealing with my brother. Then in that same month of March, the person who made a vow to be with me walked out.
Oh, wow.
So I was dealing with the grief of my brother, who then passed away, my health, because I now I had to have a major surgery that has left me with a beautiful 8-inch scar on my belly, and then grieving that abandonment, right? And so I had to, when I went through that, I'm very blessed that, when it was said and done, the doctor tells me, they didn't know for sure what was going on. And then he said, okay, now we know for sure it's a neuroendocrine tumor and it's cancer. And this is what he said, and I'm quoting, he said, "It's not the bad kind." And I don't know if that was his way of making me feel better.
Yeah.
When they're trying to
you don't often hear that. Yeah.
Right? Like when he's trying to explain something, like if that was the best term for me, and I took, it was a sigh of relief. However, yes, they had to take it out, and I still suffer from a lot of the, issues from having that. And then he told me, I have 10 years worth of continual checks, to ensure that I would be okay. And when I was going through that, childhood, later on in life, everything in between, and then 2020, a lot of people was asked how I call myself the comeback queen, because I've had to come back so many times, and I did it because there was two things I think about. A lot of people will say, well, just take it one day at a time. Well, guess what? One day at a time was too much for me, Sarah. I had to take it 1 hour at a time. So I'd look at the clock, and this is true. I'd look at the clock, and then about an hour or so later, I'd look at the clock again, because I'm a a clock watcher. I look at the time again. I'm like, okay, I made it another hour. Okay, one hour closer to the end of this day. Not just one whole day. I had to take even smaller pieces. Another thing is that I've told myself nothing lasts forever. Nothing lasts forever. And it's true. I tell this to my kids and my grandkids. Now, nothing lasts forever. And you will get through this. I didn't have a choice. I had to get through it. And there are things that I say, you just don't have a choice in the matter. And I just didn't have a choice. I was going to get through it because for me, it was, well, a lot of people ask, why is this happening to me? And why not me? Why would I be exempt from these things happening to me? No tumors ever in my family history. Never. No one else in my family except like an aunt of mine had twins. I ended up with twins. Like all these things that wouldn't happen to other people happen to me. I guess I'm special. I'll just say I'm special. But knowing that when they told me one day at a time, it was too much for me. Getting help when I needed it, recognizing my need for professional support, and understanding that nothing lasts forever. You will get through this because Gladys, you don't have a choice. Or I would have just dug a hole and crawled in there. And that's not an option in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I know I hear you when you say even the advice that you've given your children. And I think those are almost great mantras. And, I've had conversations like that with my kids where I kind of say like, something's going to shift, you don't know where it's going to go. It's uncomfortable, but something's going to change. And so I like that nothing lasts forever. It can kind of be really helpful, I think, mentality for kids as well. So that's great. And you definitely seem to have the ability to kind of talk yourself through things, right? Like not everybody's able to do that, to find their kind of their own inspiration, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah. My son says I have a way of compartmentalizing, that's very unique. I have to put one thing, in each box and deal with that one thing. And so, and talk myself through that one thing, because if I take on too many things and I'm trying to deal with, when I was dealing with those 3 major things in 2020, I had to deal with one thing at a time. My brother's in the hospital. Gladys, you better get it together because you have to make decisions for his life. Then the surgery, okay, now I'm going under, and this is not going to be an easy surgery. And then, okay, now I'm alone in this house. How am I going to afford to pay for this house? One thing at a time, 1 hour at a time. And that's it. That's how I got through it. And that's how I'm going to continue to get through the rest of my life. Otherwise, I don't know, because life's not easy. I know that something's probably down the pike waiting for me. It's possible. Yeah. And you never know. And you can't even plan for a lot of these things, right? They just come at you. So no, those are great ways to think for sure. And it's definitely got you through, it sounds like, a lot of challenging times. I wondered if you wanted to talk, I know you mentioned that, you're a coach now, and I wondered if you sort of wanted to talk about that transition and how you've kind of moved to your successful business and today. Yeah, this makes me smile. I'm smiling because this is why I had to go through everything. This is why, because I had to be here today with you and be here for other people. And so I had an amazing career in human resources. Like, here's this, dropout, right? Like, who ended up, having to go to school, not getting the right degree, being a teen mom, having more kids. And I ended up with an amazing career in human resources. I grew that corporate ladder, and for 25 years, ended my last role as a senior human resources consultant. And I decided, this was, not so long ago, that I want to help other people. How do I do it? I had a conversation with my son. My son is really a huge inspiration for me. And I became a certified coach, and I'm like, well, what is it? Who do I want to focus on? Who am I going to be coaching? And it's that being confident. It's being fearless. And that's one of the areas that I focus on, right? It's that fearlessness, that confidence that you can do it. If you're stuck, if you have a decision to make, if there's something going on, you can do it confidently and fearlessly. And then I also empower professionals navigating their career in human resources or their career in general. And that transition took place when I realized that, well, so many things had already happened to me. And I'm like, well, now what do I want to do? I really, that is going to make an impact one person at a time. Mm-hmm. And this is it. This is my passion. And this is what I'm supposed to be doing in life, is talking to people, like you, getting the story out there, inspiring, motivating, coaching people when something's going on with them that they're unsure how to navigate. And so the transition has been an amazing one. And so, yes, now I have my own practice, and now I love coaching people. There's a Latino community as well that needs coaching because they think that, that they can do this on their own, and that they don't need, someone to help them navigate their goals, and not caring for themselves. And this is a lot of who I help, but also it's just helping people. So I have that twofold kind of business right now, because I'm more than just one thing. Mm-hmm. I'm a box of crayons. I'm a box of crayons with pick the color of your choice, and I'm going to help you through that. That's what I'm going to call myself. That queen that's colorful and a box of crayons.
That's great. No, and I'm so glad that you found something that you love and that you can put your time and energy into, because you definitely have a lot of energy. And
I do.
And I think that totally makes sense with, some of the mentality that you have, that you are coaching people to be fearless and how to move forward. That makes so much sense. So I wondered, before we wrap up, are there any other key pieces of advice or tips or tools that you want to share?
I think some of them were shared, right, Sarah? Some of them were shared where, when we talk about thriving in tough situations, and that beast, that monster, that gremlin, whatever it is that's being thrown at us, is that doesn't last forever. Take it an hour at a time. Focus on one thing at a time. If you try to do everything, you do nothing. You do nothing. And so just try to do one thing at a time. And I love it. I'm actually looking at my monitor right now, and it says, you got this. That's my reminders. I got this. No one can tell me otherwise. I was supposed to be a statistic as a teen mom, a Latina teen mom from the ghetto in Chicago. And that's not how it turned out. And why? Because I got this. And it's really a lot of self-talk and a lot of self-love. A lot.
That makes sense. That sounds great. Okay, so I am sure that listeners are going to want to find out a bit more about you. How can they do that? Is there a website, a social media handle, online, anywhere?
Yeah, definitely. So my website is Camacho CC for coaching and consulting .com, CamachoCC.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me if you just look for, Gladys Camacho or Camacho Coaching. You can definitely find me. And so, yeah, definitely, I'd love to help some of your listeners. If there's someone out there that grabs inspiration from this, and if my job here is done, then it's done, and I'm okay with that. I'm in peace with that.
That's great. And I'm sure others are going to definitely want to connect with you. I will put those all into the show notes so that people can just kind of click away and find you that way. Well, thank you so much, Gladys, for your time today. I know I feel definitely inspired by your story, and I'm sure others will, and appreciate you sharing with us.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so blessed to have been here. Take care.
Thank you so much to Gladys Camacho for that conversation. As I said off the top, she's very inspirational. She definitely gets you thinking about that self-talk, telling yourself that you got this, and thinking through some of those tough situations and how to get through in that way that she talked about, one day at a time. If that's too much, looking at 1 hour. She said that she often tells herself things like nothing lasts forever. You'll get through this. Why not me? In kind of that positive way to find inspiration. So I like that. There's so much that we need inside ourselves to get through different situations. And, similarly, I went through a lot of bullying as a younger child. And I feel when I look back, it was that hope that I always had that eventually somebody's going to get me, or eventually I'm going to find people that, want to be with me and want to spend time with me, or eventually I'm going to be somebody that's, good for other people. And so I think holding on to that hope is really helpful. And I liked her focus on inspiration. So if you'd like to hear more about Gladys, please check her web pages and Instagram out. Her website is camachocc.com, and you can search her on Instagram as well. And I will link those all up into the show notes so you can find out more about her if you're just looking for more information. I hope that everybody is having a good week. We had family day here, and I actually had to work, but the family had a good day, and we had a good longer, I guess, for them weekend, but a fun weekend, we'll say. And so I hope that everyone else is doing that if you do celebrate Family Day, and if you celebrate Pancake Tuesday or Mardi Gras or whatever you're celebrating in February, I hope that you're enjoying it. We will see you next week for another great conversation. Thank you for listening to the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast. Please keep in mind, this podcast is not intended to be medical or professional advice. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can follow me on social media, Instagram and TikTok at Sarah Lady Gluten, or Facebook, Sarah_gluten-free lady. You can also visit my website, which includes author information, speaking information, and more info on the podcast at www.se-german.com. If you like the podcast, please feel free to review the podcast on your favorite platform and also subscribe, because it means that it will show up for you every week on your favorite podcast platform. Also, we've just started to have the ability to support the podcast. You can find this link in my Instagram bio or visit Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/learning to slay the beasts. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week.